Hello to all of you lovers of mysteries, curious souls drawn to the darkest corners of humanity. Before we plunge into a story that will make you reflect, send chills down your spine, and perhaps even change the way you see the world around you, I want to take a brief moment. If you're someone fascinated by unsolved mysteries, chilling crimes, and the pursuit of justice, then this is the place for you. Take a second to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Your support is the driving force that allows me to keep bringing you the most captivating and terrifying stories. Now, turn off the lights, wrap yourself in a blanket, and prepare your mind. Together, we'll journey back in Toledo, a quiet American town, where a shadow of terror once spread, and the story of the Orchid Killer began. Oak Haven, Massachusetts, had always prided itself on its timeless beauty, a quaint tapestry woven from colonial history, old money charm, and rolling New England hills. Its cobblestone streets, lined with centuries-old oak trees, whispered tales of pilgrims and patriots, of quiet lives lived under the watchful gaze of the Atlantic. Tourists flocked to its vibrant fall foliage, its historic mansions, and its thriving art scene, mistaking its tranquility for an impenetrable shield against the ugliness of the modern world. No one could have predicted that beneath this veneer of idyllic peace, a predator was stirring, ready to shatter Oak Haven's innocence with a brutal symphony of fear. The first crack in that shield appeared on a crisp Tuesday morning in early October. Eleanor Finch, a spry 72-year-old widow renowned for her prize-winning dahlias and her fiercely independent spirit, was found dead in her meticulously kept Victorian home. Her daily routine had been as predictable as the sunrise, a fact that made her absence at the morning's garden club meeting immediately suspicious. When her neighbor, a kindly woman named Martha Jenkins, peered through Eleanor's front window and saw an overturned teacup on the gleaming mahogany table, she knew something was profoundly wrong. Detective Elijah Vance, a man whose face carried the weariness of 2 decades on the Oak Haven Police Department, arrived at the scene with his partner, Detective Olivia Chun. Vance, a native son of Oak Haven, felt the weight of the town's silent expectation on his shoulders. He knew every street, every back alley, every family secret that had ever cast a shadow on this place. This wasn't just another case. It was a violation of his home. The Finch residence was a tableau of incongruity. Eleanor lay on her Persian rug, her eyes wide and staring, a crimson stain blossoming across her antique lace blouse. The cause of death was immediately apparent. Blunt force trauma to the head, delivered with savage efficiency. Yet the house itself was undisturbed. No forced entry, no ransacked drawers. The silver gleamed in the display cabinet, and Eleanor's modest jewelry box remained untouched on her vanity. It was as if death had arrived by appointment, a silent, invited guest who then turned monstrous. No signs of struggle, boss. Liv Chun, a sharp, methodical detective barely in her 30s, noted as she moved through the living room, her tablet in hand. Liv was Vance's antithesis, meticulous, by the book, a stickler for procedure. She saw patterns where Vance felt emotions. Door was locked from the inside. Windows secure. Alarm system wasn't armed. Vance knelt beside Eleanor, his gaze scanning the scene, trying to piece together the silent narrative. Eleanor was a creature of habit. Who would she let in? More importantly, why? She knew her killer, Vance murmured, a familiar chill crawling up his spine. This wasn't a random break-in gone wrong. This was personal. But what kind of personal? Eleanor Finch was beloved, if a little eccentric. She had no known enemies. Liv moved to the coffee table, her sharp eyes catching a flicker of color against the dark wood. Detective Vance, look at this. Nestled beside the overturned teacup, a single, delicate orchid petal lay like a forgotten jewel. Its color was an ethereal shade of purple, almost lavender, veined with intricate patterns that seemed too perfect, too beautiful for the scene of such brutality. Vance picked it up with a gloved hand. He wasn't a botanist, but he knew enough about local flora to recognize this wasn't common. Felt foreign, exotic, out of place. An orchid petal? Vance raised an eyebrow. She wasn't known for orchids, Liv. Dahlias, yes. Roses. But not this. Liv bagged the petal carefully. It's a Phalaenopsis orchid. Maybe a hybrid. Not something you'd find growing wild around here. Someone put this here. The petal, a silent, beautiful calling card, was the only true anomaly in the otherwise sterile crime scene. It gnawed at Vance, a seemingly insignificant detail that felt profoundly wrong. They processed the scene for hours, collecting fibers, dusting for prints, interviewing the shell-shocked neighbors who spoke of Eleanor in hushed, reverent tones. Yet, they found nothing else to connect them to the killer, no other trace beyond the unsettling purple sliver. The Oakhaven Police Department, accustomed to petty theft, traffic violations, and the occasional domestic dispute, was ill-equipped for a murder of this nature. The news of Eleanor Finch's death spread like wildfire through the small town, initially whispered with disbelief, then shouted with outrage. Who would harm Eleanor? And why? The orchid petal remained a baffling mystery, an artistic flourish on a canvas of violence. 3 weeks later, the whispers turned to screams. Thomas Albright, a respected history professor at Oakhaven University and a pillar of the community, was found in his study, just as meticulously arranged as Eleanor Finch's living room. Like Eleanor, he had been bludgeoned to death. Like Eleanor, there was no forced entry, no signs of struggle, no theft. And like Eleanor, a single, lavender Phalaenopsis orchid petal rested on a stack of his ancient textbooks, a macabre signature. Panic, cold and sharp, gripped Oakhaven. 2 murders, 2 seemingly unrelated victims. The same brutal method, the same chilling calling card. The serene facade of the town cracked further, revealing the raw fear beneath. Children were kept indoors, doors were double-locked, and the once bustling town square grew eerily quiet after dusk. Detective Vance felt the pressure intensify, a physical ache in his chest. His intuitive sense, honed over years, screamed at him that these were connected, not just by the orchid, but by something deeper, something rooted in Oakhaven itself. But what? Eleanor, a gardener and retired librarian. Thomas, a historian. What thread could possibly tie them together? We're looking for someone who knew both of them, someone they would invite into their homes, Liv theorized, pinning photos of the victims and their lives onto the corkboard in their cramped office. The lack of forced entry, the cleanliness of the scene. This isn't a frenzied attack. This is precise, deliberate. The killer wants to be let in. Or knows how to get in without a fuss, Vance countered, rubbing his temples. The sleepless nights were catching up to him. Maybe someone who can charm their way in, or someone they wouldn't suspect. The media descended on Oakhaven like vultures. Local news channels became national. The Oakhaven Orchid Killer became a terrifying moniker, plastered across headlines, whispered in hushed tones across the country. The town, once a beacon of New England charm, was now synonymous with unspeakable horror. The FBI was called in, a necessity for a serial murder case. Special Agent Richard Thorne, a man whose tailored suits seemed out of place in the small-town precinct, arrived with a team of profilers and forensic specialists. Thorne was all business, his demeanor cool and detached, a stark contrast to Vance's worn-around-the-edges pragmatism. Agent Thorne, Vance extended a hand, trying to project competence despite the gnawing frustration. Detective Vance, this is Detective Chun. Thorne's handshake was firm, brief. Detective, my team has reviewed your files. The MO is consistent, highly organized, ritualistic. The orchid petal, a clear signature. We're looking at a psychopathic individual, likely male, intelligent, probably charming. He gains the trust of his victims before striking. We already figured that much out, Agent, Vance said, a hint of steel in his voice. He resented the implication of their incompetence. Thorne ignored the jab. What we need is a link. Beyond the obvious. What did Eleanor Finch and Thomas Albright truly have in common? Was it age? Social standing? A specific club? A shared history? Liv, ever the pragmatist, presented their findings. Both were prominent members of the Oakhaven Historical Society. Eleanor was a longtime member, Thomas was on the board. They both had extensive knowledge of Oakhaven's past. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Interesting. Could the killer be targeting those who preserve Oakhaven's history? Or those who know Oakhaven's history? The theory resonated with Vance. Oakhaven was steeped in its past. Perhaps the killer was too. But why the brutal violence? What resentment could fester so deeply against people who simply cherished their town's heritage? Just as Thorne's team began to implement their broader investigation, the killer struck again, and with horrifying audacity. Sarah Jenkins, a vibrant 30-year-old artist and owner of a popular gallery in the town square, was found in her loft apartment. This time, the scene was different, more violent, more personal. Sarah hadn't been bludgeoned. She had been stabbed repeatedly, a frenzied, desperate attack. Vance stared at the carnage, a cold dread seizing him. The killer was escalating. The meticulous neatness of the first two scenes was gone, replaced by a raw, visceral anger. Yet, the signature remained. Nestled among the scattered art supplies, almost mocking them with its serene beauty, lay another lavender orchid petal. Liv found a message, scrawled in red paint on the wall behind Sarah's easel. Crude but chilling. The lies will wilt. Lies? What lies? Vance muttered, his voice hoarse. What the hell is this killer trying to say? Thorne, usually impassive, looked genuinely disturbed. This is a significant escalation. The switch from blunt force trauma to stabbing suggests a loss of control, or a deeper, more personal rage directed at this particular victim. The message: he believes these victims are complicit in some sort of deception. Sarah Jenkins had no obvious connection to the historical society. She was young, dynamic, focused on contemporary art. Vance's theory about the historical society crumbled. Or did it? He remembered Sarah's gallery often hosted exhibitions on Oakhaven's artistic heritage, collaborating with the society on preservation efforts. She was, in her own way, a guardian of Oakhaven's artistic past. The town plunged into a collective nightmare. Schools closed early. Businesses boarded up their windows. The once bustling streets became deserted after sundown, patrolled by increasingly desperate police officers. The Oakhaven orchid killer was no longer a chilling story. He was a very real, very present terror. Vance felt a profound sense of failure. 3 victims. No leads. Only a damn flower petal and a cryptic message. He spent hours poring over the case files, staring at the victims' faces, trying to find a link that transcended their obvious differences. Eleanor Finch, the elderly gardener. Thomas Albright, the academic. Sarah Jenkins, the young artist. Age, gender, profession, they were all over the map. What united them? One late night, alone in his office, the glow of his desk lamp illuminating the photos of the victims, Vance felt a strange, unsettling connection between them. Not a logical one, but an intuitive whisper. Eleanor, with her carefully tended garden, preserving beauty. Thomas, meticulously documenting history, preserving knowledge. Sarah, curating art, preserving culture. They were all preservers, guardians of Oakhaven's past, its aesthetic, its identity. But if they were preserving, then what lies were they supposedly perpetuating? What hidden truths was the killer trying to expose? Vance remembered an old Oakhaven legend, a ghost story told around campfires in his youth, about a forgotten scandal, a dark secret buried deep beneath the town's pristine surface. A scandal involving the founding families, whispered about but never openly discussed. It was a long shot, a wild goose chase, but he had nothing else. The orchid petal, the message, the victims, all connected to Oakhaven's essence. He picked up the phone, calling Liv, knowing she wouldn't mind the late hour. Liv, I need you to dig into Oakhaven's founding history. Not the official records, but the rumors. The old newspaper archives, the local gossip columns from 100 years ago. Anything that suggests a scandal, a cover-up, something dirty that Oakhaven would want to forget. Liv's voice, though tired, held a spark of renewed purpose. You think the killer isn't just targeting people, boss? You think he's targeting history? Maybe, Vance said, staring at the haunting beauty of the orchid petal. now framed and magnified on a forensic printout. Maybe he's not trying to kill people, Liv. Maybe he's trying to kill the lie. A cold wind rattled the window pane, a sigh from the old town. Oakhaven's beautiful facade was crumbling, revealing not just fear, but a deeper, darker truth waiting to be unearthed. The hunt for the orchid killer had just begun, and it promised to be a descent into the forgotten heart of the town itself. The fourth week since Eleanor Finch's murder dawned under a sky as gray and oppressive as Oakhaven's collective mood. The town was a shell of its former self. The usually vibrant Main Street, a hub of small businesses and local chatter, was now desolate. Its shops shuttered early, their windows bearing hastily drawn, closed indefinitely signs. The laughter of children no longer echoed from the schoolyards. Parents, terrified, kept them locked indoors, opting for homeschooling or temporary relocation. The Oakhaven orchid killer had achieved his gruesome aim. He had paralyzed an entire community with fear, forcing it to confront the fragility of its peace. Detective Vance, haunted by sleepless nights and the images of the victims, felt the weight of Oakhaven pressing down on him. His old house, nestled near the harbor, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage. He ate on the go, slept fitfully on his office couch, and barely saw his wife, Sarah, whose worried phone calls he often missed or cut short. The case consumed him, a relentless fire in his gut. Liv Chun, despite her younger years, was showing the strain too, though she channeled it into furious, methodical work. Their office, now permanently annexed by Agent Thorne and his FBI team, was a buzzing hive of activity. Computers hummed, phones rang constantly, and the air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and desperation. The corkboard, once adorned with just 3 victims, now featured dozens of potential suspects, a sprawling, intricate web of connections and dead ends. The profilers believe he's still operating within a specific radius, Thorne stated, his voice calm but firm, during their morning briefing. His initial condescension towards the local department had softened, replaced by a grudging respect for Vance and Liv's tenacity. He feels comfortable, knows the area. The escalation in violence with Ms. Jenkins suggests a personal connection, or that she represented something more acutely offensive to him than the previous victims. The message, "The lies will wilt," is crucial. It's his motive, or at least a significant part of it. "We've been digging into Oakhaven's history, Agent Thorne, as per Detective Vance's hunch," Liv reported, her finger tracing a line on a large topographical map of Oakhaven. "Beyond the official, sanitized versions. We're looking for whispers, scandals, anything swept under the rug." Vance nodded. Oakhaven has a strong sense of its own past. Sometimes that means burying the ugly parts. He felt a flicker of hope. This felt right. Their focus shifted from merely identifying victims to understanding the killer's narrative. If he was correcting a lie, what was that lie? And who were the liars? Liv spent days trawling through brittle newspaper archives from the early 20th century, microfiche records, and even dusty town meeting minutes, searching for any hint of scandal or forgotten injustice. What she found, eventually, was not a single, explosive event, but a pattern of subtle disenfranchisement, a slow erosion of trust, tied to the establishment of the Oakhaven Botanical Conservatory. Founded in the late 1800s by a consortium of Oakhaven's wealthiest families, it was initially hailed as a marvel, a testament to the town's cultural ambitions. But Liv found faint, almost obscured references to a bitter land dispute, allegations of eminent domain abuse, and the quiet ruin of several smaller landowners and indigenous families whose ancestral plots were absorbed into the grand project. One family, in particular, the McGregors, had their entire livelihood a thriving nursery business specializing in rare flora systematically dismantled, leaving them destitute and eventually forcing them to leave Oakhaven in disgrace. The official records glossed over it, portraying it as a benevolent civic improvement. But the whispers in the old tabloids, the letters to the editor, told a different story. "The Oakhaven Conservatory," Liv announced one evening, pushing a stack of photocopied articles across Vance's desk. "It's the common thread. Eleanor Finch was a major donor to the conservatory's annual orchid show. Thomas Albright wrote an entire chapter on the conservatory's architectural history in his definitive book on Oakhaven landmarks. And Sarah Jenkins? Her gallery curated an exhibition last year celebrating Oakhaven's botanical heritage, featuring early prints of the conservatory's original designs. Vance felt a jolt. The orchid is not just a calling card. It's a symbol. It's a direct link to the conservatory and perhaps to the McGregors who cultivated rare plants. He stared at the images of the victims, and they all, in their own way, glorified or benefited from the very institution built on those lies. Thorne, listening intently, tapped his pen on a file. So, the killer is targeting individuals who, however innocently, perpetuate the narrative of the conservatory as a symbol of Oakhaven's prosperity, effectively erasing the original injustice. He's an avenger, a revisionist. The new theory galvanized the team. They shifted their focus to anyone connected to the conservatory, its current staff, past benefactors, descendants of the founding families, and, crucially, any surviving members or descendants of the McGregor family or other disenfranchised groups. The search for the McGregor descendants proved difficult. The family had vanished from Oakhaven decades ago, their lineage seemingly dissolved into the vast American diaspora. But Liv, relentless, eventually unearthed a faint census record, a name in a distant state, a thread that led to Dr. Alastair Finch. Dr. Alastair Finch, a brilliant, reclusive botany professor at a small, prestigious university 3 states away. He was a direct descendant of the ruined McGregor family, though he had taken his mother's maiden name later in life. He was also a renowned expert on orchids. His academic papers detailed the history and cultivation of rare botanical species, with a particular focus on the Phalaenopsis, the very genus of orchid petal found at each crime scene. Vance's heart pounded. Eleanor Finch, the first victim. Dr. Alastair Finch, a descendant of the wronged family. The same last name. Coincidence? Or a deliberate, twisted irony on the killer's part? Wait, Liv interjected, her eyes widening as she cross-referenced something on her tablet. Eleanor Finch. She was not related to Alastair Finch. Her husband's family had been prominent Oakhaven landowners for generations. They were actually among the original benefactors of the Oakhaven Conservatory. They acquired some of the McGregor land through, shall we say, questionable means. A cold, hard clarity settled over Vance. He's not just avenging his family, he's taking revenge on their families. Eleanor was targeted not just for her association with the conservatory, but because her family was part of the original injustice. The orchid petal was not just a symbol of the conservatory. It was a symbol of the McGregor family's lost legacy, a perversion of their craft used to mark the downfall of their perceived oppressors. The new profile of the killer solidified. Alastair Finch, highly intelligent, meticulous, driven by a deep-seated, generational resentment. His knowledge of botany, his reclusive nature, his perceived slight, it all fit. He would be charismatic enough to gain entry, but harboring a seething rage beneath the surface. Just as they zeroed in on Alastair Finch, the orchid killer struck for a 4th time, and this time it was a near miss for the investigators. The victim was Arthur Pendleton, a cantankerous but beloved local historian who ran the Oakhaven Genealogy Library. Pendleton had been an outspoken critic of what he called the sanitized history of Oakhaven, often hinting at dark secrets, even mentioning the McGregor land dispute in a series of obscure, self-published pamphlets. Vance and Liv had actually planned to interview him more extensively the next day, hoping he might lead them to the killer. Pendleton was found in his office, sprawled amidst dusty tomes, a single lavender orchid petal clutched in his dead hand. But this time there was a survivor. Pendleton's young assistant, a timid graduate student named Chloe Peterson, had been working late, hidden in a back room. She heard the confrontation, the muffled blows, the heavy thud. She described a figure, tall and gaunt, moving silently through the library, muttering to himself about truth and atonement. She hadn't seen his face clearly, but she remembered his voice calm, almost academic, yet filled with a chilling conviction. And she remembered the distinctive, sweet and earthy scent of exotic orchids that permeated the room after the killer left. The near miss, the witness, provided a crucial, albeit terrifying, validation of their theory. The killer wasn't just killing the lie, he was silencing those who sought to uncover it, or those who, like Pendleton, knew too much but didn't speak loudly enough. He must have heard that Pendleton was digging into the same history as us, Vance surmised, a grim look on his face. He saw Pendleton as a threat, or perhaps an unworthy messenger of the truth. He intends to reveal himself. Chloe Peterson's description, though vague, further solidified their suspect. A man of intellect, articulate, meticulous in his methods, yet capable of sudden, brutal violence. It was a perfect match for Alistair Finch's profile. They moved to obtain an arrest warrant, gathering every piece of circumstantial evidence that linked him to Oakhaven and the victims. However, Alistair Finch had vanished. His apartment near the university was empty, his car gone. He had anticipated their move a step ahead always, but they knew where he was going. He was coming home, not to his current residence, but to the place where his family's ruin began, the symbol of his vengeance. Oakhaven. Vance felt a profound, chilling certainty. The killer was in Oakhaven. He hadn't just returned to exact revenge. He had returned to stage his final act, his macabre truth-telling ritual. The victims were just pieces in his twisted play. The orchid killer was not just a murderer. He was a performance artist of vengeance, and Oakhaven was his stage. The abandoned Oakhaven Conservatory, where the McGregor family's nursery once stood, suddenly took on a new, ominous significance. That would be his final canvas, bathed in the silent beauty of orchids and the brutal crimson of retribution. The hunt was no longer for a ghost. It was for a tangible, dangerous man, and Vance knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the final confrontation would be as rooted in Oakhaven's history as the very lies the killer sought to expose. The night settled over Oakhaven, pregnant with unspoken fears and the chilling knowledge that the town's darkest secret was about to be laid bare. Vance looked at Liv, his resolve hardening. Get a team. We're going to the conservatory. I have a feeling he'll be there, preparing for his grand finale. The web had finally unraveled, revealing a name, a motive, and a destination. But the orchid killer was not done, and the final chapter of Oakhaven's horror was yet to be written. The chill of the late October night bit deep into Oakhaven, a pervasive cold that seemed to seep into the very bones of the town. A thin, anemic moon cast long, skeletal shadows over the deserted streets as Detective Vance, Liv Chun, and a contingent of heavily armed police officers and FBI agents made their way towards the abandoned Oakhaven Conservatory. The once grand structure, a decaying monument to forgotten ambition, loomed ominously on a hill overlooking the town, its glass panels shattered, its once lush gardens overgrown with wild brambles and spectral weeds. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and something else, something subtly floral yet unsettlingly sweet, the unmistakable aroma of exotic orchids. He's here, Vance murmured, his voice tight, his hand resting instinctively on the grip of his service weapon. His gut, honed by years of walking the tightrope between intuition and evidence, screamed it. This was where it ended. Agent Thorne, walking beside him, nodded grimly. Our intel suggests he bought a large quantity of rare orchid specimens from a specialized supplier just days ago. He's been planning this finale for a long time. The conservatory's ornate iron gates, rusted and creaking, gave way with a groan as the tactical team breached them. Inside, the main glasshouse was a cathedral of decay. Broken panes allowed the wind to whistle through, creating mournful, echoing sounds. Tropical plants, once meticulously cared for, had either withered or mutated into grotesque forms, thriving wildly in the humid, controlled environment, now a jungle reclaiming its dominion. But amidst this chaotic natural reclamation, there was an unnatural order. Rows of potted orchids, hundreds of them, bloomed in an astonishing array of colors and species. They lined the pathways, hung from broken trellises, even sprouted from cracks in the damp concrete, creating a surreal, breathtaking, and utterly terrifying display. The lavender phalaenopsis, the killer's signature, was everywhere, its delicate petals a stark contrast to the surrounding ruin. "My God," Liv whispered, her breath fogging in the cool air. "It's beautiful and horrifying." At the center of the main glasshouse, bathed in the weak moonlight filtering through the shattered roof, stood Dr. Alistair Finch. Tall, gaunt, his figure eerily still amidst the vibrant flora. He wasn't armed in the traditional sense, but in his hands he held a single, magnificent, deep crimson orchid, almost black at its heart. His eyes, when he turned to face them, burned with a feverish intensity, a lifetime of suppressed rage simmering just beneath the surface. Beside him, bound and gagged to a sturdy iron pillar, was Mayor Thomas Sterling, the scion of Oakhaven's oldest and most influential founding family, a direct descendant of one of the chief architects of the McGregor family's ruin. Sterling's eyes, wide with terror, pleaded with Vance. "Alistair Finch," Vance called out, his voice echoing in the vast space. "It's over. Let the mayor go." Alistair's laugh, a dry, reedy sound, filled the conservatory. "Over, detective? No, it has just begun. The truth finally will be heard. And then, perhaps, it will be over for Oakhaven's lies." His gaze swept across the orchids. "These are the last descendants of my family's prize collection, detective. Rescued, cultivated, brought back from the brink of extinction. Unlike my family's name, which was systematically eradicated from Oakhaven's history books." He took a step towards them, the crimson orchid held aloft like a chalice. "Eleanor Finch, Thomas Albright, Sarah Jenkins, Arthur Pendleton. They were all complicit. Eleanor's family stole our land. Thomas glorified the thieves. Sarah romanticized the very institution built on our suffering, and Arthur knew the truth but chose to whisper it in pamphlets instead of shouting it from the rooftops. They all benefited from the lie, from the silence." Vance raised his weapon slightly. "Alistair, you've made your point. Your family was wronged. But this is not justice. This is madness." "Madness?" Alistair's voice rose, trembling with contained fury. "Is it madness to demand what was taken? To resurrect a name that was buried under layers of Oakhaven's quaint charm and historical significance? My family built this town's botanical heritage, only for it to be stolen and rebranded. These orchids are all that remain of our legacy, and they will witness the final act of atonement." He looked at Mayor Sterling, a chilling calm settling over his features. "And Mayor Sterling, the last bastion of Oakhaven's founding fathers. Your lineage, your privilege, is built directly upon the bones of my ancestors. You represent the lie itself." Thorne, ever cautious, tried to de-escalate. "Dr. Finch, we understand your pain. There are legal avenues for redress. We can help you expose the historical injustices." Alistair scoffed, a bitter smile playing on his lips. "Legal avenues? My family tried those, Agent. They were dismissed, ridiculed, then erased. No, my justice is botanical. It is precise. It is undeniable." He reached into his coat and produced a small, silver-plated spray bottle. "Do you know what this is, detective? A highly concentrated, fast-acting neurotoxin, derived from the very plants my ancestors studied. A single mist, and the lie will wilt, just as my family did." The air crackled with tension. Vance knew this was a hostage situation, not a negotiation. Alistair wasn't interested in talking. He was interested in his final, theatrical statement. "Drop the bottle, Alistair," Vance ordered, his voice steady. "There's still a way out of this." Alistair ignored him, his gaze fixed on Mayor Sterling. "The beauty of it, detective, is that the very air that sustains these magnificent creatures will be his undoing. A subtle, elegant death, befitting the lie he represents." As Alistair raised the spray bottle, Liv Chun, positioned stealthily behind a large, overgrown fern, took her shot. It wasn't aimed at Alistair, but at the bottle in his hand. The sharp crack of the pistol echoed deafeningly through the glasshouse. The silver bottle shattered into 1,000 pieces, a fine mist dispersing harmlessly into the air, and the crimson orchid Alistair held dropped to the ground, its petals scattering. Alistair roared, a guttural sound of thwarted vengeance. He lunged at Mayor Sterling, a hidden blade suddenly appearing in his hand. Vance, anticipating the move, moved like lightning. He tackled Alistair, sending them both crashing into a bed of delicate orchids. The blade skittered across the concrete floor. Alistair, fueled by a lifetime of suppressed fury, fought with surprising strength. He clawed at Vance, his eyes wild, spitting venom about generations of deceit. Vance, older and more tired, struggled to contain him, the metallic scent of his own blood mingling with the sweet fragrance of the orchids. Thorne and the tactical team moved in, but the tight, overgrown space of the conservatory made it difficult to get a clear shot or intervene without endangering Vance or the mayor. Alistair, seeing his final act crumbling around him, let out a desperate, animalistic cry. He spotted the shattered remnants of the neurotoxin bottle, still glistening with droplets. With a surge of adrenaline, he broke free from Vance's grasp, scrambling towards the pillar where Sterling was bound. His intent was clear. He would use his bare hands if he had to. But Liv was faster. As Alistair reached Mayor Sterling, poised to deliver a fatal blow, Liv fired again, this time aiming for Alistair's leg. The shot was precise. Alistair screamed, collapsing amidst the orchids, his grand finale ending not with a triumphant act of vengeance, but with a whimper of pain and defeat. The conservatory fell silent, save for Alistair's ragged breathing and Mayor Sterling's gasping coughs as Liv quickly unbound him. Vance, bruised and bleeding, knelt beside Alistair, placing handcuffs on his wrists. "It wasn't worth it, Alistair," Vance said, his voice heavy with a mix of exhaustion and sorrow. Alistair, defeated but unrepentant, looked up at Vance, his eyes still burning. "You don't understand, Detective. You never will. They thought they could bury us. But the roots go deep. Oakhaven will never forget now. The truth will bloom." The phrase hung in the air, a chilling premonition that Oakhaven's nightmare was far from over. The aftermath was a whirlwind of investigations, media frenzy, and collective catharsis. Dr. Alistair Finch, the orchid killer, was taken into custody, charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and kidnapping. His confession, delivered with a detached, academic precision, detailed the years of planning, the meticulous cultivation of his revenge, and the chilling symbolic significance of each victim and, of course, the orchids. His trial was a national sensation. The story of the McGregor family's historical injustice, once a buried whisper, now became a screaming headline. Oakhaven was forced to confront its own past, its sanitized history ripped open for all to see. The conservatory, once a symbol of prestige, became a monument to hidden shame. Mayor Sterling, though rescued, was deeply shaken and later announced his retirement, unable to escape the specter of his family's legacy. The town began an initiative to formally acknowledge the historical wrongs committed against the McGregors and other dispossessed families, a slow, painful process of healing. For Detective Vance, the case left an indelible mark. He had brought the killer to justice, but the cost was personal. The serene Oakhaven he knew was gone, replaced by a more complex, scarred reality. He saw the world, and his town, with a new, somber clarity. He eventually took a long-overdue sabbatical, spending time with his wife, trying to piece back together the parts of himself that the orchid killer had shattered. Liv Chun, however, emerged from the crucible of the orchid killer case as a formidable detective, her meticulousness tempered by a new understanding of human darkness. She was promoted, her reputation forged in the fires of Oakhaven's terror, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The Oakhaven Conservatory, still standing but more dilapidated than ever, became a chilling tourist attraction, a macabre reminder of the town's hidden depths. And sometimes, on still, humid nights, a faint, sweet scent would drift from its broken panes, the ethereal, unsettling aroma of exotic orchids, a silent, beautiful epitaph to a town's lost innocence and the brutal truths that finally bloomed from its forgotten soil. The lie had indeed wilted, but in its place, a bitter and beautiful truth had taken root, forever staining the idyllic charm of Oak Haven, Massachusetts.